Here are 8 Node.js projects that you should keep an eye on if you want to become an amazing developer. The very first one on the list is Kaitoscape. Kaitoscape is just over here. It can be found on js.kaitoscape.org, and it is a JavaScript library for representing data in graphical ways. And not just graphical ways, ways that you can interact with it too. Let's take a quick look at some of these examples. I personally like this one just down over here, which is one with nodes and endpoints that we can utilize in real time. We can actually drag these across and see how they interact with each other. And this is what I mean, like you can actually combine these, have a look at how the edges work, have a look at how the node spacing works. And for example, if this was a relationship between how often we use jQuery and React, we would see no connections whatsoever. And yet here, this is probably more of what my Node.js libraries look like, pretty much just all over the place. And if you want to check this whole list out, I'm going to add a link in the description. This article here was by Ghosh, and he's actually put it together on dev.to, a place that only the most hardcore developers go to for their coding news. And you guys have to definitely check that out. This next library might seem simple, called PDFKit, which essentially allows you to generate PDFs using JavaScript inside Node and send it to the browser. Now, this is more useful than a lot of people might realize. When you're building out applications, whether it is an API, whether it's an application with e-commerce, you'd be surprised just how often you have to generate PDFs. This library essentially does all the heavy lifting for you, and you'll be able to generate a PDF pretty much any way you want. So whether you want to use, say, a HTML canvas or SVGs or transforms, it does all of that. And I know that I personally use this on a lot of the e-commerce websites that I've made in the past. This makes life a lot easier. So whether you need to just have someone download a PDF or you have to email it to them, this library will take care of everything. This one time I had to generate over 2,000 PDFs and email them out. And this was absolutely insane. There was no way I could do this on my own. I actually used this library and automated the whole thing. And this gives you an example of just how powerful it can be. But if we want to talk about real power, we can't do this list without mentioning Socket.io. This name pretty much comes up every single time I ever do an idea talk or a brainstorm on app development or ideas, because it's the go-to when we're talking about a library that does cross-communication, whether it's from browser to browser or to the server or pretty much anywhere. This thing can communicate even sideways if it needs to. And it essentially is easy in terms of the syntax as well. You simply do a couple of lines of code here and immediately you've got a real-time application, which is not even doing polling, but is just doing push-pull updates as you need it to. Socket.io essentially allows you to build, say, real-time chat applications, or you can configure a bot which automatically communicates to your phone and to a server, or even does polling to a third party. This is really cool stuff. If you ever have to do anything real-time, check this library out because it'll pretty much have all the tools that you'll need to be able to get that done. Which brings us to our fourth entry, which is Strapi. And while it's a cool name, it's essentially a backend only system to do a CMS and for it to be completely ready in terms of API. If you're building out a website, say you're considering maybe, say, WordPress or something like that, and you want to go headless, you want to maybe build out Gatsby or something like that, why bother? Why have all that headache of WordPress when you can go straight into Strapi and all that CMS functionality is there ready for you to utilize in your next React application? Strapi is 100% JavaScript, and the APIs are nice and secure, using a lot of JSON tokens and essentially allowing you to do all the good stuff like file uploads and everything like that. So definitely check that out too. I think this will be on my to-do list to do a full tutorial on because Strapi does seem like a great library. And I've done like 100 WordPress websites last year. I think that's enough of that, and it's time to move on to bigger and better things. Next is Nest.js. This is a framework that allows you to build efficient and reliable scalable server-side applications. And essentially what that means is that you're building out code very similar to React. Now, if we take a quick look at that, we can see things like functional and object code where we've got our class component here, and we've got a render here that prints out pretty much what we're seeing here on the right-hand side. But there are some benefits to using this. It works with Express. It works on Node.js, it's scalable, we can create modular architecture, and all of this means that essentially we're taking advantage of JavaScript, and we can plug TypeScript into there, I'm pretty sure as well. And all of this is on the server side, so if you're running on Node.js, this is pretty much perfect for building out an application. Of course, we have to test this, and this is another tutorial in the making. I'm gonna have to tell you something. The fact that there are so many different types of libraries and frameworks out there just makes me feel like I'm overwhelmed sometimes. Yes, I'm sure that you guys feel the same way, which is why I wanted to tell you that it's nearly impossible to have a good grasp on all of these. I do always enjoy checking them out though, and this is why I do these videos. So if you guys have libraries that you recommend I should check out, maybe do a tutorial on, let me know in the comments below. The next thing is you guys have to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, because if you're not doing this, then you're missing out on some really good content. And of course, if you dislike this video, make sure you hit the dislike button 2 times and tell me why. Because I don't want any dislikes. I dislike dislikes. Dislikes suck. So instead, let's check out our next library. And it's here. It's called date-fns. No, sorry, date-fns. Date-fns.org is where you can find this. It is a library that essentially replaces what you'd normally use as Moment.js, which I've heard isn't the best one to utilize these days when you're trying to do things like dates and formatting and time. This works on JavaScript, it works in the browser, and it works in Node.js as well. And if we have a look at the syntax, it's probably very similar to what you're used to. So here, for example, you can use the syntax to grab a date, and you're just using the regular JavaScript syntax here, new date, but then you can use additional commands here like format or format distance or subdays. So for example, format will simply say the day today is Saturday based on the date that we've provided. If we wanted to check the distance here, then the distance shows it's 3 days ago from this date here that we've selected as well. And finally, we can find a relative version here, which says here it's last Friday. There is a lot more to this library, but dates are something that we use in most applications, so this is a useful one to check out. And if you're wondering why I say don't use Moment.js, there's a few reasons. Simply off the top of my head, it is much larger in terms of its size when you're trying to zip it up. It's also heavier, which means that it essentially does more work to be able to do the same functionality. And finally, it is hard to debug sometimes if you do have issues in it. There are just some of the ones, but I can link you to more articles if you guys want, or you can just Google that, and it is probably recommended to do to use something a little bit better these days. Our second last library here is actually called Sheet.js. This is a library that allows you to modify Excel spreadsheets. And while this seems like something you might not be doing every single day, you'd be surprised just how much work happens in an Excel spreadsheet. So for example, if you've got a local one, whether you need to read data off it for maybe a mail merge or maybe to PDF emails to someone, this essentially has you covered. You can also edit stuff, and it works in the web browser as well as servers, and it's a cool library. I have used this in the past. I've done real-time chat applications and real-time data pulls from Excel spreadsheets to be able to update data as it comes in. And this made life a little bit easier based on the application I was using, simply because I didn't have to build an entire database just to do that content. Now, it depends on your use case, but if you are working in different companies, learning something like this might help you learn how to automate different pieces of work, because lots of work are stored in Excel spreadsheets and normally updated manually. If you can build a little Node.js backend that uses this library to do stuff that you're doing manually, you might even destroy some jobs out there. But that's what we do sometimes as web developers, when we automate things. And this brings us to our final entry, the most popular, utilized framework of them all. This is Express. If you're doing any project on Node.js, you'll probably be using Express. Whether you're building out a website and it's just pulling over HTML files, whether you're creating a RESTful API, whether you're just trying to do some basic stuff, Express is the go-to. Most tutorials I see online use Express. Most websites and companies, whether it's an application or whether it's, for example, a full website, they use Express. Pretty much I've done most of my stuff in Express, and this is why it's the giant. Now, I know it has a lot of competitors, and some people prefer to use other frameworks, but Express is still the hero here. And this is why it is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node.js, and it is the last entry in this list.